The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council was the most powerful room in the known universe. It was a place of law and order, a place where empires were made or broken. At the center of the hall stood the ancient throne of stars. No one had sat on it. For over 1,000 years, many had tried, all had failed. The throne was not just a symbol, it was a test, a force of ancient design. It would only awaken for the one who was worthy, and no being had ever passed that test. The air in the hall was heavy. As the council gathered, over 50 alien species sat in their seats, tall ones with glowing skin, short ones with thick armor plates, some with wings, some with tentacles. They all whispered as one figure walked slowly down the long golden path. A human. He was the only human in the chamber, the only human ever allowed to stand before the throne. His name was Raylan Pierce. He walked with a calm step, not fast, not slow. His eyes looked forward, straight at the throne. He wore a black uniform with silver lines. His boots clicked softly on the floor. Every step echoed in the silence. But it was not real silence, because just above him the aliens began to laugh. It started with a low chuckle, then it grew louder. Some pounded their fists on the table, others pointed and laughed. One shouted loud enough for the whole hall to hear. Look at him, a human, thinking he can sit on the throne of stars. Has he lost his mind? More laughter followed. Another voice added, he must think this is a game. Another, he will be crushed like the rest. The throne destroys the unworthy. Raylan said nothing. He just kept walking. His face was still. His eyes did not move. He did not answer the insults. He did not flinch at the laughter. He reached the stairs to the throne. 7 wide steps, each one carved with glowing symbols, symbols that none had ever been able to translate. Scholars called it star script. Some said it was older than the galaxies, older than time itself. Raylan placed his boot on the first step. The laughter began to fade. He took another step, then another. By the time he reached the top, the hall had grown quiet. He stood in front of the throne now. It was massive, made of a dark silver metal with long spikes rising behind it like a crown. Stars seemed to shimmer inside its surface. It was not just metal, it was alive in some way, connected to something ancient, something deep. Raylan reached out his hand. One of the counselors shouted, stop, you are not worthy. You are not even one of us. You are nothing but a low species. Raylan ignored him. His fingers touched the throne's armrest. For a moment, nothing happened. Then it began. A low hum filled the chamber, soft at first, then growing louder. The armrest under Raylan's hand began to glow. A soft blue light ran up his fingers and into his arm. The symbols on the throne's surface lit up one by one. A wave of energy pulsed through the air. The aliens gasped. Some stood from their seats. Others backed away, their eyes wide with fear and disbelief. One whispered, it is responding. Another, no, this cannot be. Raylan sat down. The throne moved not much, just a slight shift, like it was adjusting itself for him. Then it rose just a few inches above the floor, floating. The light grew brighter. It circled around him, swirling like wind. His eyes glowed with the same blue light. Then a voice spoke. It came from the throne, or maybe from the air, or maybe from everywhere at once. Welcome, Raylan Pierce. Lineage confirmed. Access granted. Authority accepted. The hall was frozen. No one moved. No one spoke. The throne had spoken, and it had chosen a human. One counselor stepped forward, a tall being with green skin and golden eyes. He said, this is not possible. The throne must be broken. There is no way a human could be the chosen one. Another counselor, a thin creature with 6 arms and a smooth head, shook his head. No, the throne does not break. It tests the soul. It tests the blood. It knows. Raylan looked down at them from his seat, still glowing, still calm. He spoke for the first time since entering the hall. Did not come here to ask for power. I came because the throne called. Meth voice spoke again. The chosen does not seek power. The chosen carries it within. The room stayed silent. Even the loudest voices were now quiet. No one laughed anymore. The throne had not moved for 1,000 years. It had burned kings, shattered minds, refused warriors, refused queens, refused all until now, and it had chosen a human. Outside the hall, news spread fast across planets, across empires. The images were sent through the galactic network. Every screen, every station, every voice repeated the same line. The throne of stars has awakened, and it chose a human. Some cheered, some trembled, some planned. Back in the hall, Raylan looked up at the ceiling, a dome of glass showing the stars beyond. He did not smile. He did not cry. He simply sat, as if this moment had always been meant to happen. The lights from the throne pulsed once more, then faded into a steady glow. The voice spoke a final time. Let the galaxy hear. Let the stars remember. The throne has found its master. Raylan closed his eyes, his thoughts quiet, his heart steady around him. The council watched. No one knew what would come next, but one thing was now clear: the age of silence was over and everything was about to change. The throne of stars floated quietly in the center of the great chamber. It did not move much, just a soft drift in the air, like it was breathing, like it had waited too long, and was waking slowly. Raylan Pierce sat tall in the seat, his back straight, his face calm, his eyes now glowing like twin moons. Blue light pulsed gently from the throne, flowing around him in soft waves. The Galactic Council stood frozen. No one spoke, no one dared to breathe. Too loud, their eyes locked on the human seated in the ancient throne, a throne that had rejected kings, queens, warlords, prophets, even gods. But now it had accepted a man from a young world, a man from Earth, and the voice returned, the voice that seemed to come from the stars themselves. It echoed through every wall, every mind, every soul. Awakening sequence, complete lineage, confirmed command interface, unlocked heir of the first flame. Speak your will. The aliens panicked, not with screams, but with fear buried deep in their eyes. Counselor Vareth, a scaled being from the outer claw world, stepped forward with trembling legs. He raised one hand, as if trying to stop a flood with a single gesture. This is madness. The throne is confused. This human does not belong here. This is a mistake. The throne pulsed again. Its light sharpened. A wave of heat filled the air, not hot enough to burn, but warm enough to silence fools. Raylan turned his gaze toward Vareth. He said nothing, but the message was clear. He did not need words. The throne spoke for him. Now a second counselor, High Matron Zayla, one of the crystal-born from the Nebula Choir. Her voice was soft but strong. The throne does not mistake. The throne does not guess. If it has awakened, then its choice is real. The silence grew heavier. It weighed down on every shoulder in the room, even the proud ones, even the angry ones. They all felt the same truth sinking in. The throne had chosen, and there was no taking it back. Suddenly, the throne shifted again. A panel opened on its left side, revealing a glowing orb floating in a socket of energy. Lines of alien script spun across it. The orb lifted into the air, spinning gently above Raylan's open palm. Galactic access unlocked, memory pathways restored, seed worlds identified, control granted to Raylan Pierce, bearer of the flame. All lights in the hall dimmed. The walls shifted, revealing projections of star systems, maps of long-lost worlds, ancient gates, faded routes that had vanished from the records of all known empires. One star blinked brighter than the rest, the system closest to Earth. A red line linked it to another, then 1,000 more. It was a network, a star map, hidden for ages, visible only to the one seated on the throne. Raylan watched without blinking. He felt it, not just knowledge, but connection. His mind touched the systems, felt their hum. He understood them in a way that could not be taught. The throne fed him visions, not with words, but with emotion, with instinct, with power. He saw builders shaping planets. He saw guardians sealing away ancient machines. He saw flames lighting the first stars, and in all of them, in every face, every hand, there was something human, not in body, but in soul. A spark that had survived. The voice returned once more, this time deeper, older, slower. You are the echo of the beginning. You are the return of the flame. You are the memory of what we were, and the guide to what we must become. Raylan's fingers tightened around the orb. He felt it merge into his skin, not burning, not painful, just becoming part of him, a key that no longer needed to be held, because it had found its home. Counselor Harkle, a beast with iron limbs and lava in his veins, roared from his corner of the hall. This is a threat to galactic balance. One species cannot rule us all, especially not a species that just left its home star. He moved toward the throne, slow at first, then faster. His claws clicked on the floor. Guards did not stop him. They watched, afraid to act, afraid to disobey. Raylan did not stand. He did not raise his hand. He just looked at Harkle with glowing eyes. The throne responded. A shield burst into existence around it, a perfect sphere of golden energy. Harkle slammed into it. The impact sent him flying back across the hall. He landed with a heavy crash, groaning, smoke rising from his armor. The voice echoed again. Only the chosen may approach. Only the chosen may command. Only the chosen may live within the flame. Harkle did not rise again. The hall was silent, this time truly silent. Raylan spoke at last. His voice was not loud, but it carried like a river under the earth, steady and strong. I did not come to take the galaxy. I came because the throne called me. I came because it is time to wake up. You all forgot where you came from, but I remember, even if I never saw it before today. Now I remember. Some counselors looked away, others stared at him, trying to see if this was still a man, or something else. Zayla stepped forward. She knelt slowly, her crystal hands touching the floor. I recognize the throne's choice, and I will follow the flame. Then another counselor knelt, then another, not all, but enough to shift the tide. Raylan stood at last. The shield vanished. The throne stayed afloat. Behind him, waiting, silent, alive, he walked forward, each step matched with a pulse from the throne. The hall opened before him. He was not just a guest. Now he was not a stranger. He was the center. Outside the great chamber, across the stars, across hundreds of worlds, ships received the signal from the throne. It was not a command. It was not a broadcast. It was something more ancient, older than radio, older than data. It was a calendar. Across those stars, something began to answer. Lights on long-dead satellites flickered back to life. Temples buried under desert worlds opened their doors. AI minds that had gone silent for eons whispered once more. The network was waking, and it all pointed to one place, Earth. Back in the council hall, Raylan looked at the sea of alien faces. He saw fear, he saw hope, he saw confusion. He spoke again. I am not here to rule over you. I am here to lead forward or stand aside if someone better proves worthy. But the throne chose not me, us, all of us who still remember what it means to build instead of burn. He turned to the throne. Its light softened like it was proud. Then the council chamber doors opened on their own. No one had touched them. They simply opened, waiting for him to walk through. He stepped forward. The throne floated behind him, a silent guardian, a burning crown, and as he passed through the doors, the voice whispered one last time, "The flame has returned. The galaxy will remember." And for the first time in 1,000 years, the stars began to change. Raylan stepped out of the great chamber and into the cold light of the capital sky. The towering spires of Council Prime rose around him like frozen thunder, each one a symbol of power, each one home to a species that believed it was the center of the galaxy. But now they all stood quiet, watching, waiting. The throne of stars floated behind him. No chains, no wheels. It did not need them. It followed, as if it had a will of its own, a guardian bound by something older than time. Its light no longer blinding now, it pulsed like a steady heart. The wind was sharp on Raylan's face. He looked up and saw the sky, filled with ships, too many to count, some shaped like daggers, others like beasts, some old and rusted, some newer than light itself. They hovered in silence, each waiting for a message, each waiting for a signal. He did not speak, yet the throne did not speak. The galaxy would speak first. A projection appeared in front of him, huge, larger than a city block. It was the face of Supreme Voice Reltharn, leader of the Varn Dominion. His skin was gold, his eyes black, an unreadable human. "You have taken the throne, you have broken tradition, you have disrupted balance. This cannot go unchallenged." Another face joined beside the first, Queen Urel of the Sapphire Mind. Her body shimmered like living glass. "We do not recognize your claim. Your people are still children. You are not ready for the weight the throne brings." More faces appeared, one by one, leaders, admirals, high judges, warlords, all speaking at once, all casting doubt, some calm, some angry, some afraid. But one thing connected them all: they feared what the throne might do. In human hands, Raylan stood on the edge of the platform. The cold wind tugged at his coat. His face remained still. The throne pulsed behind him, not in anger, not in warning, but in patience. Then one more face appeared, not royal, not famous, an old woman with wrinkled skin and sharp silver eyes. Her name was Serotonin, exile from the Oren. Reach. Her voice was soft but cut through the others like a blade. "The throne does not bow to fear, it bows to truth. And we all know what truth we have tried to bury." The voices fell quiet. Her words hung in the air like a blade ready to fall. Raylan spoke at last. He did not shout, he did not beg, he simply spoke. "The throne chose me because I still remember what others forgot. It chose me because I carry the memory of flame, not to destroy, but to warm, not to conquer, but to rebuild." He lifted his hand. The orb embedded in his skin shimmered. The sky changed. 1,000 old satellites around the planet lit up. A golden grid formed in the clouds, a shape, a pattern, something long lost. Star code, the first language known only to those who had built the throne itself. The leaders on the screen froze. None could read it, but all of them felt it. A pull-a-call, a memory. Raylan continued, "This code was written before your empires were born. It speaks of the cycle of rise, of fall, and of renewal. The throne awakens not to crown a king, but to warn of a storm coming, a darkness that once almost ended everything." Silence again. Then the throne lit up. A beam of light shot from its crown. It pierced the sky, reached beyond orbit, reached into deep space, all across the galaxy, sleeping Machines awoke, some hidden under ice, some deep in oceans, others buried in suns. They began to speak to each other, old language, old code, and one phrase repeated in them: all the flame has returned, prepare for the silence. Back on Council, Prime panic began to spread, not chaos, but urgency. Ships moved, messages flew, plans changed. The ancient systems had not activated in 1,000 years. Their return could only mean one thing: the cycle was beginning again. Raylan looked up at the beam. He could feel its energy, not just in his skin, but in his blood and his soul. He turned back to the council building. Zayla stood waiting. She had gathered others behind her, not all of them counselors. Some were soldiers, some were engineers, some were historians. All of them had seen the signs. All of them believed. Zayla spoke without fear. The time for debate is over. If the silence is returning, then we must prepare, and we will follow the flame. Raylan nodded. Then we begin now. The next hours moved like fire through dry forest. Fleets launched codes, decrypted temples, opened ancient texts, read aloud. For the first time in millennia, the galaxy was waking, not with joy, not with fear, but with purpose. Raylan moved among the workers, the soldiers, the thinkers. He did not act like a king. He lifted boxes, he studied star maps, he sat with the old scholars, and he listened. The throne followed him, always behind him, always silent, its light dimmer now, like it was saving its strength. Late into the cycle, he stood at the edge of a launch platform, looking out at the stars. Zilla joined him. You knew this was coming, she said. Raylan nodded slowly. Not with my mind, but my bones always felt at earth, always felt out of place, like we arrived too late to something we were supposed to build. Zayla tilted her crystal head. And now you build again. He looked at the stars. One blinked, then another. Not natural blinking, not light, but signals. They're coming, he whispered. Who? She asked. Not people, not armies, not ships. Something else, something that waits for empires to rot, something that feeds on endings. She said nothing, but her eyes glowed faintly, not in fear, but in readiness. Raylan turned back toward the throne. He reached out, placed one hand on the armrest. It hummed gently. He closed his eyes, let the vision come again. He saw the black stars, the empty ones, the ones that devoured light. He saw worlds with no sound. He saw fleets crumble without war. He saw memory fade like smoke, and he saw a flame, small but steady, moving through the dark, lighting paths, waking the old guardians. He opened his eyes. We have time, not much, but enough. Then we act, Zayla said. And so they did. Across the galaxy, humans and alien scientists and soldiers all worked, not as masters and servants, not as rulers and ruled, but as survivors. The throne did not command them. It reminded them of what they once were, of what they could still become. Raylan walked among them, not as a god, not as a leader, but as a flame. And though the stars did not know peace, and the darkness still waited beyond their reach, the galaxy burned once more, not in war, but in unity. And the throne of stars watched and waited for what came next. Deep space held its breath between dying stars and forgotten moons. Something ancient began to stir, not fast, not loud, just a slow ripple through the black sea, a shift, a whisper, the kind of silence that screams louder than war. Raylan Pierce stood inside the core chamber of the Vault of Echoes, an ancient station older than any empire. It floated above a gas giant that had no name left, only a number, only ruins. The throne followed him. Its light was low, soft like candlelight, but it still pulsed with purpose. Zayla moved beside him, her crystal form reflecting ancient screens. Their team had worked for 6 days with no rest, decoding the symbols, mapping the echoes, searching for what the throne had sensed. This is not just a vault, Zayla whispered. This is a lock, and something is pushing from the other side. Raylan touched the old metal wall. It vibrated like a living thing, like it remembered pain, like it feared what it held inside. He turned to the others, a mix of human engineers, alien researchers, military observers, all of them tired eyes sunken, hands shaking. We need to go deeper, he sighed. A tall man stepped forward. Commander Joran of the Orion Guard, his voice sharp, like cut steel. We have lost 5 drones down there. No signal, no return. Something is absorbing all light, all sound. Raylan nodded slowly. Then I will Goth room, protested voices rose. Warnings flew like arrows, but the throne pulsed once, and they all stopped. Raylan looked at Joran. If we fear the dark, we will never light the stars. The elevator descended into black metal, creaked, lights flickered, air grew colder with each level. Raylan stood alone, no guards, no weapons, just the throne behind him, its glow the only light left. He reached the final floor. A door waited. It was not built. It was grown stone, shaped by wool, covered in carvings that moved when he looked at them. He placed his hand on it. The carvings froze. The door melted like mist, and beyond it the darkness waited, not just the absence of light, but something alive, something. Old Raylan stepped forward, the darkness wrapped around him, not like a trap, but like a question. Then he saw Ida's sphere floating in the center, not made of matter, not made of energy, just a presence, a hole in the universe, and from it came whispers, not in words, not in voice, but in thoughts, feelings, pain. He saw flashes of old worlds, crumbling stars falling in on themselves, civilizations forgetting their own names. The silence, it was not a weapon, not a creature, not a fleet, it was forgetting it was. The collapse of memory, the slow death of purpose. He stepped closer, the whispers grew louder. He saw himself old, alone, sitting on the throne, while everything around him turned to dust. He saw Earth empty, forgotten by even its own sky. He saw Zayla broken, her crystal body cracking, trying to remember what they fought for. The sphere pulsed. It showed him every ending, not just as everyone else. Then the throne responded. Its light burned gold. It flared across the chamber. It pushed the darkness back, not with force, but with memory. Raylan remembered Earth's first launch, its first message to the stars, its first story shared across galaxies. He remembered laughter, tears, the small moments that built empires. He stepped into the light. The whispers screamed, but the throne sang louder, and the sphere began to crack, not destroyed, not banished, but touched by something real. Raylan reached out, his hand passed through the sphere. He felt cold, then warmth, then balance. He pulled something out, a shard, black, weightless, a piece of the void. He held it in one hand. The throne behind him pulsed in approval. This is what the silence left behind, a key, a warning, a memory. He returned to the surface. Zayla ran to him, eyes wide. "You touched it," she said. "Yes," Raylan answered. And it remembered. Mayhay placed the shard on the central console. Data poured out, not in numbers, not in images, but in emotion, a living archive. It showed the first silence, how it began, not with war, but with doubt, with mistrust, with disconnection. Worlds stopped talking, alliances broke, voices turned inward. And when no one listened anymore, the silence came. It did not destroy, it erased. Raylan turned to the others. This is how it spreads, through division, through fear. We must remain connected. We must keep telling our stories, or we will vanish like they did. Joran stepped forward. Then we must unite the fleets, build the beacons, spread the flame to every system. Zayla nodded. Every planet, every moon, every station must feel it. Raylan held the shard tighter. Then we begin today. The next weeks burned through the galaxy like wildfire flame. Beacons were built on moons and space stations, each one a signal tower, each one spreading memory, songs, voices, truths of who they were. Fleets moved in patterns that spoke of unity, not world enemies, shook hands, shared stories. Old ruins became schools, weapons were melted into tools. Not everyone joined, some still feared, some still whispered that the human throne was a trick, that the flame was a lie, but they were fewer each day because the flame did not force, it invited. Raylan stood at the center, not a king, not a ruler, but a reminder. He spoke in every system, shared Earth's story, not as a perfect world, but as a stubborn one, a world that never stopped trying. He met with old kings, young rebels, forgotten tribes, each time listening first, each time offering the shard, letting them feel what he had felt, hope. Through memory, the silence watched, it waited, it tested, a station in the gray spiral lost. All light, no screams, no signs of struggle, just silence. Raylan arrived in hours. He walked through the dark halls. He placed his hand on the walls. He remembered the people, their voices, their music, and the light returned because the silence could only take what was forgotten. And Raylan never forgot. He kept the shard near his heart. It pulsed when danger came. It warned him, it guided him, but it also reminded him that he was still human, still afraid, still fragile, still trying. The throne never left his side, but it spoke less now because it trusted him. It knew the flame burned strongest, not in machines, not in commands, but in choice. The galaxy was not saved, not yet, but it was awake, and it remembered its name, not empire, not war, not dominion, but unity. In the throne of stars, for the first time in 10,000 years, was no longer alone. The stars blinked one by one, as if the galaxy itself was beginning to breathe again. For the first time in generations, the great races spoke, not in threats, but in stories. Messages crossed the void like shooting stars, carrying poems, songs, memories. Even the coldest machines began to hum with new voices. The flame had spread like a slow storm, not one of fire, but of feeling. Raylan stood inside the celestial archive, a moon-sized ring drifting beyond the edge of the known sectors. It was made not of metal, but memory. Walls glowed with forgotten dreams. Floors whispered names of those who had vanished before time was recorded. He had come here, chasing echoes. Something was singing from within the archive, not in sound, but in presence. The Throne had guided him here. Its pulse was faint but steady, as if even it was unsure what lay within this ancient place. Zilla followed, close behind, her crystal limbs dim in the shadowless light. Her voice was quiet, not out of fear, but out of respect. This place was sealed during the first silence. No one knows what it holds. Raylan nodded and walked forward. Every step he took triggered flashes, not traps, but glimpses. He saw a child drawing stars in the dirt, a soldier writing a letter he would never send, a scientist weeping at the edge of discovery. None of them had names, but all of them were remembered here. They reached the center chamber, a circular room with no floor, no ceiling, just light, floating like water. In the center was the source of the call, a single object, a sphere made of dust and flame. It floated without moving, singing in silence. Raylan stepped toward it. The shard in his chest began to glow, not in warning, but in answer. The throne stopped moving. It stayed at the edge of the room, watching, listening. Raylan reached out. The sphere opened like a flower. Inside was a figure, not living, not dead, a projection of something once human, a woman with eyes made of starlight and skin like woven time. She looked at Raylan and smiled. Her voice filled the space, not through ears, but through the soul. You carry the last light, but you are not the first. Raylan said nothing he knew. She was more than a recording. She was a memory, given shape, one of the original flamebearers, a human who lived before the first silence. She showed him visions, the time before unity, when humanity first touched the stars, when the throne first woke, when the great council first laughed. She showed him the rise, and then the forgetting, the slow drift into silence. The battles fought not with weapons, but with isolation, worlds choosing silence over connection. He saw the moment the first sun dimmed, not from age, but from sorrow. The figure looked at him again. The silence is not an enemy. It is a mirror. It waits for voices to stop, for love to be buried, for fear to replace truth. Raylan felt the weight of her words. The flame was not just a weapon, it was a promise to never stop singing, to never forget. The figure raised her hand. From the sphere rose fragments, songs, images, moments from 1,000 lost worlds. She placed them inside Raylan's shard, and it burned with new color. The past must live, or the future will die. She faded like smoke. The sphere closed the room, dimmed. Raylan turned to Zayla, her face unreadable. We were never alone, he whispered. She nodded slowly. Now we carry them too. They returned to the throne. It floated calmly, its pulse steady, but Raylan felt it. Something had changed. The throne knew they were no longer running from the silence. They were walking toward it. Back on Council Prime, the galaxy had changed. The alien leaders no longer looked to Raylan with suspicion. Now they looked with need. They wanted to learn, to listen, to remember. Queen Yrel opened the vaults of her ancestors. The Varn Dominion offered its star charts from before the collapse. The Stoneborn of Karis sang war songs that turned into lullabies. Raylan watched it all, not as a ruler, but as a student. Then the beacon on the edge of Sector 19 went dark. A pulse echoed across space. No message, no trace, only cold. Raylan flew there in person. He found a graveyard, not of ships, not of people, but of memory. Entire cities forgotten, not destroyed, just erased. Names vanished, stories gone. He touched a wall. It gave him nothing. The silence had touched this place, and it had fed well. Zayla found one survivor, a small child, no name, no voice, just eyes wide with confusion. Raylan held the child, sang Earth's first song, a melody from long ago. The child did not respond, but the throne did. It pulsed once, twice, then glowed bright, and slowly the child blinked. A tear rolled down, and then she whispered a single word, home. It was enough. They left a new beacon there, not just a machine, but a garden. They planted memories, stories, laughter, for the silence could not touch what was loved. More worlds followed, some resisted, some doubted, but the flame kept burning. Raylan became more than legend. He became echo in schools. Children painted his face in stars in temples. Priests whispered his name, not as God, but as guide on battlefields. Soldiers carried his stories in the lining of their armor. But Raylan remained human. He still cried. When alone, he still laughed too hard. He still made mistakes. Because that was the truth of the flame. It was never perfect. It was just persistent. One night under the twin moons of Demos Kai, he sat beside Zayla, watching fireflies that glowed in patterns of lost languages. Do you think it will ever end? He asked. Zayla looked at the sky. It always ends, but maybe this time we can end it. Singing. Raylan closed his eyes. The shard pulsed. The throne floated near, and somewhere far beyond the reach of stars the silence paused, because it had heard a song it did not know, a song of imperfect hearts, of stubborn hope, of memory stronger than fear. And for the first time In all the dark the silence listened. The throne of stars drifted above the molten clouds of Yaltris Prime, silent, unshaken, waiting below it. The surface burned with flame rivers and lightning storms, but none of it could touch the throne. It hovered like a god that did not care to speak. But now it began to pulse. Raylan Pierce stood on the command deck of the beacon ship, soulless flame, his gaze fixed on the throne. It was changing, not in form, but in presence. It was no longer a relic. It was becoming something more. Zayla stepped beside him. She felt it too. Her crystal limbs trembled, though no fear touched her eyes, only awe. It is waking, she whispered. Raylan nodded slowly. The shard near his chest began to glow brighter than ever before. The ancient fire that lived within it sparked with a rhythm he had never felt. All systems on the ship flickered, lights dim, screens glitched. The throne was calling something or someone. A message arrived from the deep edge of the flame network, not sent through tech, but through memory. A dream shared across minds. An old species had returned, the Wraith, extinct for over 8,000 years. Now they had walked out from behind the silence. Their ships were carved from light and shadow, their words not spoken, but sung with soul, and they bowed before Raylan's image. They remember the last flame. Zayla said they carried it into hiding. When the silence came before Raylan closed his eyes, he saw their memory, fleeing from dying stars, saving stories, planting them inside comets. They were not warriors, they were librarians of the cosmos, and now they returned to join the flame. Once more the throne pulsed again, this time sending waves across systems. All flame beacons lit at once, even the dormant ones, even the broken ones. The network was alive like a spine of fire stretching across galaxies. Raylan stepped forward. He reached for the throne. It did not resist. Instead, it descended slowly, gracefully, until its edge touched the beacon ship's deck. He climbed upon it. There was no ceremony, no crown, just silence. Then his voice echoed across the flame. We are not finished. The throne reacted, not with sound, not with light, but with gravity itself. Every planet with a flame beacon felt a shift, a moment where up and down vanished, where time skipped like a record, and in that pause, every being heard a single thought. Remember, Maya whisper, not from Raylan, not from the throne, but from the galaxy itself. The flame had burned deep, and now the stars spoke. Raylan saw the future in flashes. New cities built with memory, children raised with stories of unity, war turned to ritual, weapons reforged into instruments, fleets that once clashed now danced in formation across nebulous skies. But he also saw shadows, new threats forming in corners untouched by the flame, not the silence, something else, something born from it. Zayla saw it too. She turned to Raylan, eyes dim, voice firm. There are still those who fear connection. They have watched us grow, and they have prepared. From the outer rings came signals, encrypted in ancient tongues, plans of machines without soul, fleets without names. They called themselves the Echo-bound, not destroyers, not seekers, but recorders. They wished to end the living so the past would stay pure. Raylan stood tall, the throne lifted with him. He reached to the shard. It burned red for the first time. Then we meet them not with war, but with truth. The council gathered on the crystal steps of Veraxis. Thousands stood beneath the sky dome, the stars visible even in daylight. Raylan spoke, without pride, without demand, only clarity. The flame is not only for us. It is not a banner of power. It is a mirror, and if we are not brave enough to look into it, then we become the silence. The council agreed, all but one, the Maltrix sovereign, a leader of cold logic and older wounds. He had lost half his world to the first flame war, and he still believed that peace was an illusion wrapped in fire. He rose, his voice like broken stone. You offer memory, but I remember pain. Raylan looked at him. He did not argue. Instead, he placed the shard on the ground. Then share your story. Let your voice be heard. The Maltrix sovereign stepped forward, touched the shard, and his memory poured out, not rage, not hate, but grief, loss of home, loss of faith. And in that grief, a child crying beneath a shattered dome. The council saw it, felt it, understood it. Raylan nodded. That pain is part of the flame. To the Maltrix sovereign bowed, not to submit, but to honor truth, and the flame grew stronger. The Echo-bound arrived sooner than expected. They came not in ships, but in storms, artificial wormholes tearing the sky. They did not speak. They only recorded. Whole stations vanished, not destroyed, erased from time, as if they never were. Raylan stood at the edge of one such tear. He felt the cold hunger behind it, not evil, just empty. The throne pulsed once, twice, then opened. It revealed its core, not metal, not energy, but a library, millions of souls stored as song, as color, as dance. Raylan stepped inside. His body vanished, But his memory remained. Zayla called his name, but the throne closed. Then the stars shifted, the throne multiplied, one became two, then 10, then 100 each appeared above a flame beacon, and from each throne came a story told in Raylan's voice, not of glory, not of conquest, but of failure, of choices, of love found and lost. The echo-bound faltered, their recordings corrupted, because Raylan gave them too much to contain, too much life, too much truth. The tears began to close, not by force, but by understanding. The echo-bound paused, listened, and some of them wept, because even machines could remember. Once they were given something real, Raylan returned not from the throne, but from every memory he had shared. He became more than a man. Not a god, but a thread in every story. Children dreamed of him, old ones whispered of him, and stars burned brighter when his name was sung. The flame was no longer just a fire, it was a galaxy-wide heartbeat, and the throne of stars had finally fulfilled its promise, not to rule, but to remind that connection is not weakness, that story is not softness, that memory is the strongest shield against oblivion. The stars stood silent over the edge of the known sky. Galaxies blinked softly in the distance, as if holding their breath. Below them, the throne of stars rested upon a mountain made of memory. Its golden frame shimmered with echoes from every world that had ever spoken truth. Every voice it had once heard now whispered again, not in sorrow, but in song. Raylan Pierce stood alone at the summit, his face bathed in the glow of the flame, not a single weapon on his body, not a single wall in his heart. Just the shard near his chest, pulsing slowly like the heartbeat of a sleeping god. All around him, the leaders of the galaxy had gathered, not in armor, not in pride, but in robes of shared purpose. The council that once laughed now stood in silence. Not out of fear, but respect. Zayla stepped forward, her crystal skin flickering with colors unknown to language. She spoke softly, not to command, but to remember. We were broken before you arrived, not in body, but in meaning. Now we are something new, because you reminded us who we are. Raylan did not speak. He turned to the sky. The silence was coming again, not to destroy, but to test. It always returned to see if the galaxy had forgotten itself, but this time would be different. The flame was no longer a secret, it had been shared, planted, grown across worlds. Every child born now carried a story. Every elder sang of the days when fear ruled, and how hope shattered it with just a spark. A rift opened across the stars. Darkness spilled from it like smoke made from old time. The silence had changed. It wore no face. It carried no ships. It came as shadow, as stillness, as the absence of all things. Planets began to lose color. Beacons dimmed. Even the songs of memory grew quiet. But then a sound rose. A single voice, soft, human, singing an old song, not of war, not of peace, but of walking through the dark, while still holding a candle. Others joined. Zayla, the Varn priests, the Maraith elders, the children of the Karis. Moon's voices became a wave, became a roar. The silence paused. For the first time it hesitated. Raylan stepped onto the throne. It rose into the sky, not to fight, but to listen. The shard at his heart opened, releasing all the stories it held. They spilled into space like starlight. Memories formed shapes, not weapons, but faces. Laughing children, falling lovers, old friends reunited. The silence reached forward, but it could not touch them, because memory cannot be erased when it is loved. Raylan spoke finally, his voice simple, his words few. We are still here, and that was enough. The stars flared once, not in rage, but in rhythm. The galaxy answered back. The flame burst from every beacon, not to burn, but to guide, a signal across every void, a reminder across every silence. The rift began to close. The shadow recoiled, not defeated, but understood. It had come to find weakness, but found only unity. Raylan descended the throne, returned to the mountain. He stepped off slowly, his face older, his eyes clearer. The leaders came to him, but he shook his head. It is not about me. It never was. He placed the shard into the ground. From it grew a tree. Its leaves shimmered with living light. Each branch held a story. Each root touched a world. The flame would continue, but without a throne, without a king, because true power is not in ruling, but in remembering. Years passed, then centuries, then more. Raylan's name became a melody sung in the wind of space. On ships, children learned his story before they learned how to steer on worlds once divided. Now united, people celebrated Flame Day with fire dances and starlight feasts. Even machines learned to dream again because they were given purpose through song. No empire remained, no banner stood above others, only memory, only shared truth. The silence did return again and again, but never with the same hunger. Each time it came, it found a galaxy full of stories, and it always listened. Zayla lived for many more ages. She became a teacher, a keeper of the flame. Her body aged not with time, but with wisdom. Her voice was the last to remember Raylan's real laugh, and she never let anyone forget it. In a quiet corner of the galaxy, a child sat beneath the flame tree. He asked his mother, who planted it. She smiled, told him of a man who carried a throne but chose to walk beside others, a man who listened, a man who remembered. The boy nodded, then placed a stone beneath the tree, carved with his own name, so that he too would not be forgotten. And in the deepest part of space, where even light feared to go, a small pulse echoed, soft, gentle, unyielding. The flame lived on, not in fire, but in story, not in thrones, but in hearts. And the silence never won again, because it could not erase what had been loved.